Welcome, everyone. My name is Sue, and I am a program associate here at the Elmhurst Library. And tonight we're going to be using a hybrid format. So we have viewers both here in person as well as on Zoom. And if you are watching from Zoom, we're using a webinar format. So you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. We're going to do question and answer at the end. So in person, hold your questions to the end. However, if you are on Zoom, you can add those questions to the Q&A or the chat at any time. On Zoom, if you'd like to see a live transcript, you're going to look for your toolbar and captions or show captions. If you don't see that, look for more and then captions. The library is using our assisted listening system. It's a headphone. It's pretty easy to use. You can come see me in the back of the room. We also have access to the Listen Wi-Fi app where you can access it from your phone and use your own headphones or your hearing aid. Please take a moment right now to silence cell phones, watches, or any other devices that will make noise. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you about a couple programs that are coming up. The first one is coming up on Monday, February 9th from 7 to 8 p.m. I don't know if you know, but this is the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. So we're going to have a lot of programs coming up. And so the first one is James Madison, Father of the U.S. Constitution. Terry Lynch will be here portraying James Madison. And then the following Thursday, the 12th, from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m., come to Culture Club and learn about the parks of Montana and the Dakotas. Both of these programs are hybrid. And if you're interested in them, I'm going to add the links to the chat, and anybody here in person, I'd be happy to help you with it after the program. But tonight, we have Chris Parsons with us. He's the director of the Elmhurst University Jazz Festival, and he is going to be presenting Jazz, the American Art Form. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining me this evening. My name is Chris Parsons. I'm the director of the Elmhurst University Jazz Festival. I enjoy any chance I have to talk about this event. I've been a part of it in one way, shape, or form for the last 21 years. And my deepest thanks to the Elmhurst Public Library for inviting me to talk this evening. I hope that after this presentation, you'll have a greater appreciation and a knowledge of the festival. I'll spend some time talking about the history and evolution of the event, some of the National Endowment of the Arts Jazz Masters Award winners that have performed on our stage, and why the spirit of jazz is just as relevant today as it ever has been. The precursor to the Elmhurst College Jazz Festival began in 1967 as the Intercollegiate Music Festival. Founder and promoter Bob Yeed hosted a series of regional events throughout the country that included states such as California, Pennsylvania, and Arkansas. The Midwest regional event was held at Northwestern the very first year. Winners of each region would win an all-expenses-paid trip to a national event, first held in Miami, Florida, but the following year, the national event was moved to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. With the support of the center's director, George London, Yeed's event gained much-needed notoriety and validation. In 1968, at the suggestion of editor from Downbeat magazine, a corporate sponsor of the festival, and a City of Elmhurst business, Yeed was encouraged to move the Midwest regional event from Northwestern University to Elmhurst College. The music department embraced the idea of Elmhurst hosting this event, but in a tale as old as time, there was resistance from school officials to be involved in any such event. Eventually, the powers that be allowed the festival to take place with the stipulation that no music department money could be used to fund the event. Music department chair Jim Sorensen went looking on campus for an ally. Associate Dean of Student Jim Cunningham heeded the call. Cunningham was a dedicated educator with a lifelong passion for jazz. He jumped on the opportunity to host the event and relied on resources provided by the student union. Some of those resources were monetary, but his greatest asset was a group of enthusiastic students who were eager to volunteer their time. In 1968, the winner of the Midwest region, now hosted at Elmhurst College, was the University of Illinois Jazz Band, which featured a young vocalist by the name of Denise Eileen Garrett. In just a few years' time, this vocalist would go on to sing with the legendary Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra in New York. While establishing her career, she began to perform with some of the biggest jazz stars, including Max Roach, Dexter Gordon, and Sonny Rollins. By now, this singer was known to the world as Dee Dee Bridgewater, a 2017 NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship winner. By 1971, the event, now known as the American College Jazz Festival, had gained some success and prominence. The Musicians' Labor Union, the American Federation of Musicians, began providing funds for each region to book big-name acts in jazz. This allowed Elmhurst College to host luminaries such as trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie in 1971, himself an 82 NEA Jazz Master Fellowship winner, and saxophonist Julian Cannonball Adderley in 1973. Adderley's appearance occurring just 6 months before his death. Despite this success, the National Festival was facing many challenges, one being the overall vision for the festival. Yeed had a desire to include folk and pop groups in the festival. However, the regional band directors were resistant, wanting the focus to remain strictly on jazz. The study of jazz at the collegiate level was just beginning to be embraced by college administrators throughout the country. I speculate that many of these directors who fought hard to have jazz included in their curriculum didn't want these newer genres sharing the billing with the jazz bands. The other bigger struggle that faced Yeed was administrative and financial. He was in constant debt to regional hosts, with payment often taking forever to materialize. This all came to a head in 1973. The national event had been moved to McCormick Place in Chicago during the National Association of Music Merchants Conference. Low turnout, aided by and partially by a severe tornado and hailstorm in the region, was the final nail in the coffin for Yeed and the American College Jazz Festival, which officially went defunct in early 1974. While many of the regional festivals folded, Jim Cunningham saw an opportunity to make the regional event a standalone fest at the college. The festival had become an important event on the campus's cultural calendar and had established a strong presence in the Chicago jazz scene. It made perfect sense to try and keep it going. Thus, out of the ashes of the American College Jazz Festival, the Elmhurst College Jazz Festival was born. Cunningham had just been appointed Dean of Students and seized on the opportunity to combine his dedication and passion for education with his love and enthusiasm for jazz. His first order of business was to scrap the idea of the festival being a winner-take-all event, instead changing the focus of the festival to be more student-centered, providing an opportunity for educational and artistic growth. Cunningham recalled in a 2003 article, "I wanted to give these college bands the chance to play and to get good critiques from knowledgeable and well-known adjudicators. We wanted the kids to learn from one another and from the pros so that this native art form didn't go the way of the dodo." Cunningham sought out artists who would serve as clinicians and instructors who, above all, quote, had an interest in education. He hoped that these interactions and observations would serve as useful teaching tools for the students as well as the band directors. Cunningham's management style of treating people honestly and fairly also helped with cementing the festival as a desired destination for musicians to want to work here, both as performers and adjudicators. Cunningham said, "We ran things on a shoestring for a while, but we always treated the artists like honored guests, and they appreciated it. There are people who have worked in some dark and dank places and to wonder if they were ever going to get paid. When Dizzy Gillespie was here, I told him how much I enjoyed his great concert with Charlie Parker at Macy Hall in Toronto. He said, I think I still ain't been paid for that." Jim and his wife, Deborah, would host the performers at their home. Deborah recalls that there was an intimacy to the festival. It was never just a job. It was always important that the musicians were well treated and made to feel welcome. Despite its annual date on the calendar occurring in February during the dead of winter in Chicago, the festival's reputation continued to grow with each passing year. Guided by the core principles of educational excellence in treating people well, colleges and professional musicians alike took notice and wanted to be a part of this event. By the late 1970s, another important character enters our story with the hiring of Doug Beach as the new jazz band director. Within a few years, Beach had turned the Elmhurst College Jazz Band from a ragtag collection of community members and students into a full-fledged professional outlet. The band embarked on its first tour, a modest circuit of high schools and community colleges in downstate Illinois. However, it wasn't long after that first tour when Beach began taking the band on overseas trips that included stops in places like Austria, Greece, Romania, the United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, and many, many others. Under Beach's direction, the band also began performing a rigorous schedule of gigs, weddings, fundraisers, corporate events, Super Bowl parties. If someone needed a band, the jazz band was there. These gigs not only provided the money needed to fund these overseas tours, but provided invaluable experience for the students to learn what it took to become a working musician. As the band grew stronger, its role in the festival became ubiquitous. Guest artists and adjudicators now had a professional level big band at their disposal, with the ability and talent to back them up for featured concerts. To this day, the guest artist performance with the jazz band is an integral part of the programming for the festival. The band has been a part of some of the festival's most memorable performances. A concert in 1982 featured two future Jazz Masters Fellowship winners, Clark Terry and Bob Brookmeyer. 2010 concert featured newly composed works by composer and arranger Patrick Williams. That year, Williams brought with him a cavalcade of LA's finest studio musicians, including Wayne Bergeron and Warren Looning on trumpet, Tom Scott on saxophone, and Bill Watrous on trombone. For the 50th anniversary in 2017, the band backed Dee Dee Bridgewater in an exciting fashion, bringing the famed singer back to the stage that she had graced 50 years earlier. The professionalism that Beach and the band brought to the table only enhanced the strong reputation that the festival had developed. With each passing year, Cunningham included Beach in the festival's fold more and more. They both shared a commitment to maintaining an excellent educational focus for the festival. Beach's position in jazz education world was also crucial to bringing in new artists and educators that shared the same mission for the festival. He brought new ideas from other festivals, one of the biggest being the comment sheets. These simple sheets contain written notes by adjudicators that provided invaluable critiques and advice for the students as well as the directors. To a director trying to elevate the level of their band, these comment sheets became gold. Beach is also responsible for introducing the Saturday Morning Clinic. This free event allows audience members to not only hear guest artists perform in an informal setting, but also have an opportunity to ask questions and engage with the artist, providing intimate interaction with some of the leading pioneers in jazz. Beach stated in 2017, the chance to be able to hear artists like that and ask someone like drummer Dennis McCrell, how'd you do that, is a rare thing. In 1995, Beach had taken over as the festival director. However, Cunningham remained involved, continuing to serve as an MC and shrewd t-shirt salesman. He stuck around after his retirement from the college in 2003 and was named Dean of Students Emeritus in 2004. Cunningham's presence at the festival loomed large. Former assistant director Mike Pinto stated that whenever Jim was around, you got the distinct sense that the patriarch of the festival was there. Cunningham attended his last festival in 2013. At the conclusion of the last concert, guest artist Byron Stripling, accompanied by the jazz band, performed Amazing Grace and the Battle Hymn of the Republic in Cunningham's honor. Jim would pass away a couple months later at the age of 74. After his passing, Beach said of Cunningham, quote, "Without Jim's presence and support, the Jazz Studies program, the Elmhurst College Jazz Band, and much of the music department as we know it today would likely never have attained as much of the success as we have all been so fortunate to be a part of. The Jazz Festival would have been a mere footnote in the college's history were it not for Jim's foresight and guidance in its early years. The festival is his lasting legacy." One way in which Cunningham's legacy has endured is in his decision to empower students to run the festival. As mentioned earlier, resources were thin in the early days. His reliance on the student union makes this event not a music event, but a campus-wide cultural experience. Volunteers aren't limited to music majors, but any and all majors are welcome. It didn't stop with students either. Faculty and staff from across departments have pitched in throughout the years. If you were a willing and able body, you were welcomed and encouraged to roll up your sleeves and get to work. Students are actively involved in putting on a professional event and gain unheard of knowledge and experience at the collegiate level. They learn how to manage staffs, tend to small but important details, learn how to navigate traffic at O'Hare, and solve unexpected problems. They have the freedom to learn and sometimes make mistakes in the safe harbor of an educational institution. In my opinion, these opportunities are truly what make college ought to be. For example, some alumni have gone on to work for large-scale festivals throughout the country. Some have gone on to manage artists that they have met at the festival or use experiences from their event to start their own festivals at their middle schools. Beach sums up the students' involvement best by saying, "People come here and tell me this is the best run festival in the country. That's a credit to the students. I'm the director of the festival, but they run it." Bouncing back to 1995, with Beach now at the helm, we enter the next era of the festival, one in which the festival is elevated to not just be a showcase for premier collegiate jazz talent, but as a showcase for the professional acts. Beach said, "If we can get the best bands, we'd draw audiences and we'd create revenue." It was a leap of faith. Every year, at least 2 evening performances feature prominent figures in jazz. The festival has had the opportunity to feature some artists just before they hit it big. One example includes pianist and vocalist Diana Krall, whose concert in 1999 occurred just 1 year before winning Grammy for Best Jazz Vocal Album of the Year, skyrocketing her career to the next level. The festival also takes tremendous pride in showcasing the great medium of big band jazz. In its heyday in the 1930s and 40s, big bands were the pop bands, but with hundreds of groups performing and touring throughout the country. As time went on, and as expenses went up, the focus of jazz moved towards smaller ensembles, easier to assemble, and more importantly, more cost-effective to tour. As a result, the few big bands that still endure today are more regional. Jazz fans would need to travel to New York, LA, or even overseas to Europe to see the top ensembles perform. However, a mission of the festival is to bring those groups to our stage. Over the years, the festival has showcased the likes of the Gil Evans Orchestra, the Count Basie Orchestra, the Maria Schneider Orchestra, Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, the Clayton Hamilton Orchestra, among countless others. There are some bands that have the name big band in it, so not as redundant. Here's an example. One of the festival's proudest accomplishments has been showcasing the works of 2010 NEA Jazz Master Fellowship winner Bill Holman and his band. Holman was a widely influential composer and arranger in LA, who led his own band for close to 50 years. It is believed by many that the 5 performances of the Bill Holman Band at Elmhurst are the only ones to have taken place east of the Mississippi River. And just last year, the festival stepped into the international spotlight by bringing the legendary WDR Big Band from Cologne, Germany. Led by musical director and longtime friend of the festival, Bob Mintzer, the band was our featured artist for an unprecedented 3 nights, performing a different set of music for each concert. The WDR Band brought about a cultural exchange that was embraced by our students, faculty, and friends of the festival. It seems impossible to believe that a small liberal arts university in the suburbs of Chicago would have the clout to reach out to a group with such notoriety as the WDR Band. However, the reputation of this festival is our greatest currency, and with the support of Mintzer, their appearance was secured. For a young musician, the chance to see bands of this caliber perform live provide a unique and rare opportunity to experience this music in person. Records and CDs are great, but nothing will replace the thrill of seeing this music performed live. For many students, this may be their first opportunity to hear a professional jazz band. It may be their first time they hear jazz performed in any kind. This was the case for myself. As a high school student in 2005, I had an opportunity to volunteer on the stage crew for the Saturday evening concert. The first professional big band I ever saw live was the aforementioned Bill Holman Band. I had never seen anything like that in my entire life, and I walked out of the chapel changed, with a new path laid out in front of me, one that I didn't know existed. But my story isn't unique. Speaking with people throughout the years, the festival has had a tremendous influence on people who've attended it, as a participant or an audience member. In addition to Dee Dee Bridgewater, jazz musicians like trombonist John Fetchcock and Michael Davis, saxophonist Rich Perry, or trumpeter Tim Higgins have all participated in the festival while in college. Not only that, these musicians have come back and played in the festival as professionals, often recalling memories of being here as a student. Notable pianist, composer, and arranger Jim McNeely, who passed away in 2025, grew up in the Chicagoland area and attended the festival as a member of the University of Illinois Big Band. He had a tremendous career performing and writing, becoming an integral in the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, which eventually became the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. McNeely would also grace the festival stage many times with the Vanguard Jazz Band throughout the years. The festival is also attended by none other than Doug Beach, who first attended as a high school student out of Broadview, Illinois, and then as a member of the Millikan University Jazz Band. While the festival's focus for many years was primarily on collegiate groups, high school participation took place back to the first year in 1968. However, sometime in the 80s, the festival began to focus exclusively on collegiate performances. This changed in 2012, thanks to the generous support from alumni Fred Gretsch and his wife Dinah. Fred Gretsch is the president of the Gretsch Corporation, a legendary instrument manufacturer of guitars and drums. Through the funds provided by the Sylvia and William W. Gretsch Memorial Foundation, high schools are invited to participate each year free of charge. The high school invitational continues to grow as a crucial part of the festival schedule. For many years, 5 schools would be invited to participate. In 2025, the festival expanded the invitational to 8 schools, and with the success of that year and through the encouragement and support of Fred and Dinah, the invitational has expanded to a 2-day event that will feature 13 different high school participants, as well as the first middle school jazz band to perform at the festival. 2021 provided a few milestone moments in the festival's history. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when everyone was forced to go virtual, many in-person events were put on hold. This didn't stop the Elmhurst Festival staff from putting on an event. With the vision of Beach and long hours and dedication put in by then Assistant Director Mike Pinto, the first Elmhurst University Jazz Festival was also the first virtual event in the festival's long history. A number of schools submitted recorded performances that were adjudicated over Zoom by our guest artist. The Elmhurst University Jazz Band recorded a feature concert with vocalist Kurt Elling, and additional performances were recorded at William Patterson University in New York. The virtual festival proved to be such a smash success, a second date was added to the calendar of April that year, allowing for a virtual high school event to take place. When the festival went back to an in-person event in 2022, the live stream was kept, allowing us to have a broader reach to jazz fans, not only across the country, but throughout the world. The timing of the live stream serendipitously began with the addition of a new digital media degree at Elmhurst. The festival now provides our students with real-world production experience that is already being utilized in the field. One of our former students was able to get a job with an NBC affiliate on the East Coast because of his work on the live stream. This kind of outreach on campus outside of the music department continues to build on Cunningham's legacy. 2021 also marked the end of Doug Beach's tenure as head of jazz studies and as festival director. Like his predecessor Cunningham, Beach remains committed to the survival and growth of the festival. Since his retirement, he has worked as an artistic director and director of development, and he currently serves as a consultant in those areas, as well as a consigliere of sorts to the festival's current director. You'll still see him around the chapel each year, working on stage as an MC. Much like Cunningham, Beach's presence is still felt within the Jazz Studies department, offering advice and guidance to myself and current jazz band director Kurt Garrison, whenever he's called upon. At the end of this year's festival, over 180 colleges and university groups, over 100 high school groups, and 1 middle school group will have performed on stage at the Hammersmith Memorial Chapel. And while this jazz festival is just a few weeks away, we are already planning our Diamond Jubilee, the 60th anniversary of the Elmhurst University Jazz Festival. While the story of the festival is an important one to tell, it's only part of the story. If the goal of the festival is to showcase and elevate jazz, then we need people and artists to showcase. Throughout the years, there have been many memorable moments at the festival, provided by some of the most unique, talented, serious, and original characters in the world of jazz. While I would love to speak about each person on that list, we simply don't have the time. I do have to attend to this year's festival over the next few weeks. But back in October, when I was trying to come up with something to talk about tonight, the Kennedy Center was in the news. My goal here isn't to editorialize on the current state of things these days. However, I couldn't help but be moved by the question, what is the purpose of a place like the Kennedy Center in our country? That question led me to see what was going on with the National Endowment of the Arts, which led me to see if the Jazz Masters Fellowship is still being presented. Fortunately, it still is, with 4 new winners named in 2026. The NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship began in 1982 as, quote, an effort to nationally recognize outstanding jazz musicians for their lifelong achievement and mastery of jazz. These awards are given to musicians who have reached an exceptionally high standard of achievement in this very specialized art form. The NEA website goes on to say, each passing year brings increased international recognition of the National Endowment of the Arts Jazz Masters Fellowships as the nation's highest honor for outstanding musicianship in the field of jazz. This award offers a solid platform for raising a worldwide awareness of America's rich jazz history by not only honoring those who have dedicated their lives to this music, but also by leading the way in an effort encouraging the preservation and nourishment of jazz as an important musical form for generations to come. For a jazz musician, receiving this award is high praise. Jazz musicians don't often make it the same way pop musicians and rock musicians do. To pursue a life's work in the arts often means going against the grain, cultivating works that may not be ready to be appreciated at the time of their creation. For an award like this to exist is, for lack of a more elegant phrase, pretty damn cool. I had known of a handful of NEA Jazz Master Fellowship Award winners that have performed at the festival, but I began to remember, what is the actual number? After some research, I've confirmed that there are 19 fellowship winners that have participated in the festival. 21 if you count Gil Evans and Count Basie. While these two gentlemen never graced our stage themselves, their music has been well represented at the festival with Ryan Truesdell's presentation of the Gil Evans Project and numerous performances by the legendary Count Basie Orchestra. So I'll say the number is 21. And here is a map that I put together of all 19 or all 21 NEA Jazz Masters Award winners and where they were born throughout the country, showing that while this is sometimes thought of as a New Orleans style of music or Kansas City style of music or New York style of music or international, it comes from everywhere in our country. And what's really cool is 3 of these National Endowment winners hailed from Toronto in Gil Evans, Marion McPartlin in England, and journalist Dan Morgenstern, who grew up in Munich. All 3 immigrated to the United States to be part of this music and eventually received this nation's highest honor. This number could be larger. As I dig into the archives of the festival, there may be names listed on the band rosters that could have performed here, but not be headliners. This is the case for 2 of these people, trombonist Slide Hampton, who grew up in Pennsylvania, and trumpet player Snooky Young, who came from Dayton, Ohio. Hampton appeared in 2002 with Nicholas Payton's Louis Armstrong Celebration Group, and Young, who had a long career as the lead trumpet player, most notably with the Johnny Carson Tonight Show Band, performed at the festival in 2008 as a member of the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra. The handful of people I've chosen to talk about here today are not just NEA Jazz Master Fellowship Award winners. They are people who have a long history with Elmhurst and the Jazz Festival. These people are Clark Terry, Bob Brookmeyer, Bill Holman, Maria Schneider, and Dee Dee Bridgewater. Trumpeter, flugelhornist, and vocalist Clark Terry was awarded the NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship Award in 1991. He had countless appearances and interaction with Elmhurst College over the years. His first appearance at the festival occurred in 1979, with subsequent appearances in 1982, 1988, 1992 for the 25th anniversary, 1995, and 2001. He also performed with the jazz band for our annual June Jazz Summer Concert, then known as the Summer Extravaganza. Terry also received an honorary doctorate from Elmhurst College in 1994. Born in 1920, Terry grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. He initially picked up valve trombone, but soon switched to trumpet. After playing in local clubs and bands in the 1940s, he enlisted in the Navy and was stationed at the Great Lakes Naval Base in North Chicago, Illinois. After his discharge, he joined the Count Basie Band for a few years before being recruited by Duke Ellington himself to join his orchestra. Terry's unique voice and approach on the trumpet became instrumental to the sound of the Ellington Band in the 1950s. After leaving Ellington's band, he briefly joined a new big band started by none other than Quincy Jones. Yes, that Quincy Jones. Long before his days as a successful pop writer and producer, Jones was a trumpet player and jazz writer who actually took lessons from Terry at a very young age. For 10 years, Terry was a member of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show Band, led by Doc Severinsen, and he would make countless appearances on the program after he left the band. Terry was also an active educator who embraced jazz education early on, creating workshops for young musicians and making stops throughout the country to clinic at schools on all levels. He remained steadfastly dedicated to jazz education, even when he was succumbing to his diabetes. Exemplified in the documentary Keep On Keeping On, Terry is shown mentoring a young blind pianist, all while Terry was blind himself and bedridden. Terry's voice on the instrument is undeniably unique. Once you hear his enthusiastic approach to the music, it's hard not to identify him on his recordings. Terry's passing occurred on February 21st, 2015, while the Elmhurst College Jazz Festival took place. I remember the energy that night, with the Bill Holman Band having just finished up another amazing performance at the festival. There was a buzz throughout the halls of the chapel when the news broke. There were musicians performing that night who were lifelong friends of Clark, and Elmhurst alumni who were in attendance who had positive interactions with him throughout the years. While there was sadness for his passing, there was comfort in knowing people were gathered together, remembering the memory and life of Clark Terry. And for those interested in learning more about Terry, I highly recommend reading his book, Clark, the autobiography of Clark Terry. I read it at a time when I knew of Terry and his association with the festival, but I didn't know much about his music. After reading his book, I dove deep into his music. I had a unique perspective of knowing the man before knowing his music, and gave me an appreciation for an artist that I had never had before. Valve trombonist, pianist, composer, arranger, and educator Bob Brookmeyer received his NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship Award in 2006. While Brookmeyer had only one appearance at the festival in 1982, his influence loomed large in the Jazz Studies department for decades, even after his death in 2011. Born in 1929 in Kansas City, Missouri, Brookmeyer began his professional career at the young age of 14, performing in dance bands throughout Kansas City. He studied composition for 3 years before moving to New York to join Claude Thornhill's orchestra in the early 1950s. While in New York, he joined groups led by Stan Getz and Jerry Mulligan. He was also an active arranger on the scene, working with the likes of Ray Charles. Starting in 1961, he co-led a group with Clark Terry, leading to an output of music throughout the decades while cementing a lifelong friendship. The two would go on to collaborate with each other off and on throughout the decades, including an appearance together at the 1982 Elmhurst College Jazz Festival. Back in the 60s, Brookmeyer also spent time in the newly formed Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, serving as a leader of the trombone section, as well as contributing to charts early on in the band's history. Brookmeyer moved to California to work in the LA studio scene in 1968, but came back to New York a decade later to become the principal writer and arranger for the newly branded Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. Lewis was in need of a new writer after the departure of his co-leader, Thad Jones. Brookmeyer hadn't written much over the last decade, but he was up to the challenge. After a few successful years working with the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, he jokingly wrote himself out of the band and began teaching at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. He also founded a music school in the Netherlands and started the New Art Orchestra in Germany. While Brookmeyer continued to perform on trombone and piano throughout his life, he had tremendous influence through his compositions, still occasionally writing for the now Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, renamed after Mel Lewis's passing, as well as composing for a number of European jazz bands. He was equally influenced by his Kansas City swing roots as much as his contemporary classical approach, constantly bridging the gap between jazz and classical in a way that very few have been able to accomplish successfully. While Brookmeyer's appearance on the Elmhurst campus is the fewest of any other people I'll speak about today, he still left an indelible mark. Through an association with one of Brookmeyer's former students, Ryan Truesdell, the jazz band was allowed access to some of Brookmeyer's music that was never made public. Doug Beach had the band to pull off this challenging music, and Truesdell was motivated to have Brookmeyer's music played live. When Jan Brookmeyer, Bob's widow, was reached out to for approval for the band to have access to the music, she mentioned that Bob was always fond of and appreciative of his appearance at the Elmhurst College Jazz Festival. With that, her blessing was given, and Brookmeyer's music lived on, culminating in a 2022 release by the Elmhurst University Jazz Band called Some of My Best Friends, featuring the works by Bob Brookmeyer. Composer, arranger, and saxophonist Bill Holman received his NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship Award in 2010. Holman had a number of appearances on the campus, first appearing in 1998 and returning in 2005, 2009, 2015, and 2017 for the 50th anniversary. He was also given an honorary doctorate by the Elmhurst College in 2009, where he led the Elmhurst College Jazz Band in a performance of his compositions and arrangements. Holman was born in 1927 in Olive, California. While he wasn't born into a musical family, he took up clarinet while in junior high school, eventually switching to tenor saxophone. He was influenced by the sounds of big bands that he heard on the radio, primarily Duke Ellington and Count Basie. After a 3-year stint in the US Navy, Holman studied mechanical engineering before deciding to make the switch to music. He studied composition at Westlake College of Music in LA while studying saxophone privately. He began to perform with groups in the area, notably the Charlie Barnett Orchestra from 1950 to 1952. Holman also began to write commercial works around this time. In 1952, he auditioned for and was hired by Stan Kenton to join his orchestra. Kenton's group was one of the few big bands to survive the big band declines of the 40s and continued to work with some success throughout the 50s. After performing with the group for a few years, he submitted his first chart to Kenton to be performed, but was rejected. However, Kenton kept Holman in mind and eventually assigned him to write a new work, Invention for Guitar and Trumpet. It became a success for Kenton's band, and eventually Holman would become one of Kenton's go-to writers and arrangers, maintaining a working relationship for over 25 years. Over time, Holman's writing took precedent over his playing. He became a go-to writer for Woody Herman, Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and Maynard Ferguson. A dream came true when he was commissioned to write for the Count Basie Orchestra, resulting in a 1976 release of I Told You So. Holman's writing helped establish what's known as the West Coast sound, and he started his own big band in the 50s, releasing several albums. And after a 13-year break between his own big band projects, he started the Bill Holman Band in 1975. He was also widely in demand by European big bands, writing for WDR Band in Cologne, Germany, the Netherlands Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam, the SWR Big Band in Stuttgart, Germany, among many, many others. And in May 2000, the Bill Holman collection of scores and memorabilia was enshrined at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Holman's music is widely championed by jazz musicians. One such example of this occurred at the Jazz Festival in 2009. When Maria Schneider, whose group was performing Saturday night, learned of Holman's group performing the following day, she rescheduled her flight back to New York and stayed one more night to be able to attend Holman's concert. Knowing that Bill's band never really left California, she seized on the opportunity to see his band perform live. And one more self-indulgent story. I happened to be a member of that 2009 jazz band when Holman received the honorary doctorate from Elmhurst College. Not only did I get to perform on a concert that he led, I was also able to drive him around. It was really a full circle moment to spend time with him, particularly after the influence he left on me just 4 years earlier. Composer, arranger, and band leader Maria Schneider received her NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship in 2019. Maria's first appearance at the festival happened in 2009, with returns in 2013, 2018, and 2024. Schneider, born in 1960, grew up in a small town of Windham, Minnesota. She was inspired early on by her piano teacher to study classical music, as well as stride piano. Her teacher instilled a love of music theory early on in her development, sending her on a path to study theory and composition from the University of Minnesota. After completing that degree, she went on to Eastman School of Music for her master's, where she concentrated her focus on jazz studies. Upon graduation, she moved to New York and was hired by Gil Evans to work as a copyist and an assistant. It wasn't long before Evans had her helping out with orchestral arrangements. And at the same time, she began studying with Bob Brookmeyer. In 1992, she started the Maria Schneider Orchestra and maintained a regular weekly gig at the Greenwich Village from 1993 to 1998. The band has gone on to have tremendous success, releasing many albums that have garnered high praise and accolades. In addition to her work with her band, Schneider is an in-demand clinician and educator, as well as a guest conductor for groups around the world. Schneider is also an advocate for musicians and musicians' rights, specifically pertaining to copyright. She has testified before Congress and has been involved in the National Academy of recording arts and science, involving initiatives to protect the rights of creatives. Schneider's 2013 appearance was one to remember. She was being interviewed by the New York Times for a long-form piece that would appear in an upcoming Sunday edition of the paper. It just so happened that on the day of her performance at the festival, the newspaper needed a photo shoot to happen. Not letting any challenge get us down, we quickly transformed one of the classrooms in the basement of the chapel into a photo studio. It was a mad scramble, but a memorable one. The article mentions the festival a few different times. Great press for us. My favorite part of it is how the New York Times set the scene for that day. Quote, on a freezing night in February, Schneider and her band played in Elmhurst, Illinois, a sleepy Chicago suburb. I've always loved that description. Finally, vocalist Dee Dee Bridgewater. She was named an NEA Jazz Master Fellowship winner in 2017. Her first appearance at the festival occurred in 1968, appearing as a student with the University of Illinois Jazz Band. She returned to the festival in 2000 and 2017. She also had appearances with the band in 2001 when she requested that Doug Beach and the Elmhurst College Jazz Band perform with her on the main stage at the Chicago Jazz Festival. It was unheard of at the time to have a college group not only play on the main stage, but to have a college group back up a headliner like Bridgewater. And in 2022, Bridgewater was awarded an honorary doctorate by Elmhurst University. Bridgewater was born Denise Eileen Garrett in 1950 in Memphis, Tennessee, but raised in Flint, Michigan. She was exposed to jazz at an early age by her father, who was a trumpeter and music educator at one of the high schools. She began performing in rock and R&B clubs at the age of 16. She attended Michigan State University before transferring to University of Illinois Champaign. There, she met Cecil Bridgewater, and the two would marry and move to New York, first performing with Horace Silver. After becoming a vocalist for the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, her jazz career took off, performing with Sonny Rollins, Dizzy Gillespie, and Dexter Gordon. She released her first solo album in 1974. Also in 1974, she began performing on Broadway, acting in the musical The Wiz. She would win a Tony Award in 1975 for her role as Glinda the Good Witch as Best Featured Actress. She continued a long stage career alternating between her music performances and acting. Throughout the 80s, she maintained a career in pop and contemporary R&B, but returned to jazz in the early 90s. And in 1994, she re-collaborated with Horace Silver and released the album Love and Peace, a tribute to Horace Silver. She won a Grammy in 1998 for her tribute album to Ella Fitzgerald entitled Dear Ella. Bridgewater has a long history of philanthropy and advocacy. She has worked as a goodwill ambassador to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. She also serves on the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz's advisory board and judges several vocal competitions for them. A favorite memory of mine relating to Bridgewater doesn't actually occur at the Elmhurst Jazz Festival or even in the United States. For this story, we need to travel all the way to Europe. In 2017, the band arrived in Perugia, Italy for the Umbria Jazz Festival. It had already been a long tour with stops in France, Germany, Poland, and Switzerland. As the band is walking through town, making their way to the stage for a sound check, Doug Beach runs into none other than Dee Dee Bridgewater. The two exchange enthusiastic hugs and hello, and after catching up, Doug asked Dee Dee if she'd be interested in performing with the band that night. Timing works and she agrees. Fast forward to the concert that night, there's already a great crowd. There's always great crowds at European festivals, but nothing could prepare them for the surprise announcement that Dee Dee Bridgewater is about to come up and perform with the band. The crowd erupts, and it became the perfect last gig for an amazing 12-day tour. As we begin to wrap up this discussion this evening, I wanted to speak on why jazz in 2026 matters right now, why in some respects, the idea of jazz is incredibly relevant today. If I were to ask 10 people what the meaning of jazz is, I may come up with 10 or more different answers. Is jazz a genre? Is jazz swing? Is it always instrumental or sung, improvised, or through composed? Is it big band or small group? Should it only be played on acoustic instruments or can it be sequenced in a computer? Is it about sounding good together or letting your individual voice shine through? The answer is yes to all of this. It is said that jazz is the great American art form. Why? Because it was made here, it grew here, Sure, the confluence of many different ethnicities, traditions, and beliefs that fueled the beginning of jazz could only happen here, and be in part because of the many ways our country was built. But I like to think that jazz is the great American art form in large part because it's a story about the underdog. If you look throughout the history of jazz, it shares all of the same beauty, blemishes, scars, and triumph that America does. The Elmhurst College Jazz Festival is one of many examples of an underdog story, constantly facing hurdles from its beginning. Since its beginning, the collective motivation and vision by many individuals led to the festival's longevity and reverence. The story of each of these NEA Jazz Master Fellowship winners helps tell the story of how uniquely American their experiences are. Each of them, from different parts of the country and different walks of life, were inspired by a similar calling. That calling is best described by the great Duke Ellington. Quote, "If jazz means anything, it is freedom of expression." Ellington doesn't say jazz is swing. He doesn't say jazz is instrumental or improvisational. He simply states that it's one's freedom of expression, that freedom to choose how we want to be recognized. Freedom of expression is a cornerstone to the ideal of being an American. Clark Terry, Bob Brookmeyer, Bill Holman, Maria Schneider, and Dee Dee Bridgewater are, in a technical sense, great musicians because they know the mechanics of how to make notes work together, or how to push air through a horn, or have the ability to sing on key. But hundreds of people know how to assemble notes together on a piece of paper, or make sound come through a piece of metal. These people have transcended the craft and created art. They express themselves in a way that you can hear in their works. You know it's one of these individuals. You'll never mistake them for someone else. Jim Cunningham, by all measures, was a qualified and competent teacher and administrator. He could have gone with the flow, taught his classes, graded some papers, and had a wonderfully respectable career in education. However, he had the vision to fuse his skills as an educator with his passion and love of jazz, and built an enterprise that has endured, inspiring generations of musicians to discover who they are. Whether it was as a musician performing on a stage, or a student volunteer discovering a passion for a new skill and parlaying that into a career. Doug Beach could have easily taken the jazz band director job and gone through the motions, perform a few concerts a semester and call it a day. But his vision and creativity to make the band something bigger than a class that just met 2 days a week changed the lives of hundreds of students over a 43-year run. While this drive and motivation of these individuals led to many of the outcomes we discussed tonight, none of these people got to where they are on their own. They are part of a community that worked together and encouraged each other. They lifted one another up when they were down and sung each other's praises during times of celebration. Cunningham couldn't have done this festival without the help of others. Beach couldn't have had a jazz band without willing participants. None of the musicians we talked about tonight could perform without other musicians sharing the stage. Nobody discussed tonight would have relevancy without the audiences applauding for more. The participation, democracy, collaboration, and negotiations of these individuals is what makes jazz and each of these people's identities uniquely American. So why is jazz still relevant today? It can teach us to find our voice, compromise with each other, and work towards a common goal for the greater good. And with that is the end of my formal conversation. And just here's a poster. I think I've done enough talking about jazz. If you're all interested in hearing some jazz, we have our festival occurring at the end of the month, featuring some great music by some great people. And I guess if anybody has any questions, I'm ready to answer some.
Does anybody have any questions here in person? I'm going to walk around with the microphone. And if you are online and have a question, go ahead and add it to the Q&A or the chat. We don't have anything right now. But Chris, of the performers that are coming up, what are you looking forward to the most?
That's hard because I'm paying all of them to come here. But, all of them, the Anat Cohen Tentet, she's a clarinetist who leads her own group along with her musical director, Oded. She usually can only tour as a quartet for the cost of a large ensemble. And when I talked to her manager and said, would the Tentet be willing to come? He said, yes, San Francisco and Chicago are her two biggest markets, and everybody's clamoring to see that Tentet perform. And it is when I first heard that record, I want to get her to this group to the school someday. And as a guitar player, I am looking forward to Steve Kovalchuk, selfishly, but Jeff Hamilton's one of my favorite drummers on the planet. And when we put this festival together this year, we had to think about cost after having the WDR band here from Germany last year. So Jeff Hamilton is probably the only person on the planet that can make a small group, a trio sound like a big band. So, and then, yeah, Dennis de Blasio. He was part of the first festival when I was a student in the jazz band. So I love that guy. And Ulysses is an amazing drummer as well. So to answer your question, I'm looking forward to the whole weekend. And to be really honest, I'm actually looking forward to Monday when the festival is over. I'm looking forward to March 2nd the most. So
I can imagine.
yeah.
How much will you have the day off on Monday? Will
No,
you
I
be
gotta
able
put it all away. So I guess Tuesday, March 3rd, I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. Has anybody here been to the festival before? Yeah.
But it's the actual planning calendar. Like, is that like a 9-month process or a?
It really, I'm still kind of learning the ropes. It really is constant. So for example, for the 2020 tickets always go on sale December 1st, unless it falls on a Sunday. So it was the end of November. Doug Beach was still had an office in the music building, and I'm sitting in there. And this is leading into the 2024 festival. And I just said, how early is too early to start thinking about next year? And he said, it's never too early. So we started throwing some ideas about, and he said, we've always wanted the WDR band here. And I said, I know that. So the story of that actually is he texted Bob Mincer and said, hey, we're planning the 2025 fest. Are you interested? Would the WDR band be interested? And or he sent an email, and then we didn't think anything of it. We went to Portillo's for lunch and came back, and he had a reply that said, I'm flying to Cologne tonight. I'll ask him. And then by about 2 days later, he said, it's a go. And then next year is the 60th. I'm already plotting, and I already have emails out to people about who wants to come to that. What makes it challenging, the thing I'm learning is, especially the beginning of the school or beginning of the calendar year is big festival season for a lot of high schools and colleges. So a lot of the people we want to book are usually booked out pretty far in advance. So I'm always thinking about it, planning the festival. Yeah. Yeah.
Sunday, is that the university groups performing? Or?
Yes. Yeah. So all day on Sunday, it'll just be college groups. We changed the format a little bit this year. Typically, Sunday afternoon would have had a featured concert, but with wanting to include more high school groups this year, we had to change the formatting and timing of everything, and it just worked out where Sunday could just be all college groups. The Elmhurst College Jazz Band, led by Kirk Garrison, will close out the concert, and we're hoping that maybe the guest artist will want to hop up and play a couple of tunes. But yeah, it's how many schools do we have? We have 23 college groups performing, and 14 undergrad, 13 high schools and 1 middle school. So this is the biggest festival we've had since we drastically changed the formatting. A number of years ago, the timing for a big band was like 15 minutes, 10 minutes for a combo. So there'd be some days that we had 30 schools performing. And it got a little insane, and we kind of had to sit Doug down and say, we have to scale this back. This is getting too out of control. But yeah, so this will actually be the biggest festival we've had in a few years in terms of participants. And with the growing of the high school festival, that's an exciting thing too, to kind of plant the seed for kids to maybe want to. I mean, part of it is a recruiting thing, but part of it is, like I said in my discussion, just you want to get these kids out to hear real music. So a lot of the band directors have already purchased tickets for the high schools to come back Friday night and Saturday night to see the groups perform. So yeah, it's a great experience.
What is the timing like for the high schoolers? Are they playing, do they play one song? Is it a set? Is it?
So each high school will get 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes to perform on the stage. And the part of the format change we had last year that we're carrying into this year, I should scale it back. Before, when they would perform, there would be on-stage comments that are made. So everybody in the crowd could come up and see or everybody in the crowd could see what the judges are saying to the students. But to allow for more time and for them with the judges, we switched last year to having the schools play for 30 minutes on stage, and then one of the judges and one of our faculty members will actually go downstairs into a classroom and set them up, and then they'll do a little bit more of a personalized clinic downstairs. And then the other judge and one of our other faculty members will stay up on the stage, and we rotate. The other thing we changed is the featured performance with the jazz band and the guest artist used to occur at the end of the day, but we now have that happening in the middle. So what's really nice is the 4 high schools that play in the morning come or stay, and the 4 high schools that are playing in the evening or in the afternoon will attend, and we'll have all 8 high schools in the crowd at the same time while the band's playing, which was hard to do when the concert was at the end of the day and schools would have to leave for band or debate club or whatever kids do these days. So it makes the energy more fun and more palatable. And the plan this year is to have them perform a couple of songs with the jazz band, but then also do a little bit of a Q&A. So in addition to the experience they're going to have with them in the classroom, we'll be able to ask questions in front of everybody.
It just seems like a wonderful opportunity for those high school students to just to even have that personalized critique session afterwards, and I would imagine be able to ask questions and have an exchange with somebody.
We're fairly unique. Like the whole vision of the whole focus of the festival is it's not about a competition, and a lot of high school jazz festivals are by nature a competition, which is fine, and there's valid reasons for that to exist. But here, we don't treat music as sport and we don't rank it. So for the kids to kind of, I wonder, I didn't play here as a high school student, but I wonder if the pressure is off a little bit because they're not trying to win gold, and if that allows for a better performance. And then, to be able to, I remember having a chance, just even as a student, getting to interact with these musicians. The thing I love about being a part of jazz is the world is small. If you read Billboard and jazz accounts for less than 1% of music sales, blah blah blah, that just means you get to call these people. I can't call Paul McCartney and have a conversation with him, but a number of years ago I was able to contact and hire my favorite guitar player of all time, Anthony Wilson. I just shot him an email and said, you want to come to this festival? And Doug Beach always put it the best way, talking about people like Clark Terry and Louis Bellson and Maynard Ferguson. He said, we get to be put in a position to hire our heroes. And that's, you have to love the music and you have to love putting the work in, but that's the community part of it is another reason why it's so cool to be a part of. Is they're right there. You could just shoot them an email and talk to them. And most jazz musicians are normal people like all of us, and they just want to talk to people too. And we do make a concerted effort to, as I said, hire people that are also educators. They may not teach, they may not be professors or band directors, but their concentration and focus is on teaching. For example, one of the trumpet players I mentioned, his name is Wayne Bergeron. He's a big time lead trumpet player. You have all heard him play trumpet in movies. He plays on the Incredibles soundtrack. He played on La La Land. He's not an educator in the sense that he teaches, but he does clinics, and he is also one of the best clinicians I've ever seen, because he can take his approach, his unorthodox approach to how he pursued his career and help kids out. And this isn't about having your PhD or your master's degree. This is just about, can you pass knowledge along? And that's why I help, but that's why I'm honored to keep this thing going, hopefully for another, I won't be around for another 60 years, but maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see.
What prompted bringing the middle school band in? Was it hearing somebody in particular, or was it like we want to target the next level down?
It was partially that, but the other thing too, at least that I started thinking about, is we have early on in the high school part of the festival, we would reach out to alumni that are out there teaching. And then gradually we've grown to just invite a lot of different high schools. But there are a lot of great middle school groups that are performing out there. And I just thought it would be cool if we started including them too. And it doesn't necessarily help with our recruiting because you're not shooting for, you don't ever go to middle school groups, but I just thought if there's great elementary, or maybe not elementary, but great middle school groups, let's just invite them too. And and really like the nuts and bolts of it too is like, it's just hard to find 16 schools too. So, but instead of looking at growing the high school invitational, provided an opportunity for more middle school groups to be in play and allow us to bring back some alumni who are teaching at these schools who would never have been invited back. And my hope, selfishly, is those middle school kids will go to high school and be like, hey, we got to go to the jazz festival, as a high school group. And really, really selfishly, I hope they decide to come to school here and want to be part of the band. And in 10 years, we'll have 15 jazz bands performing, and it'll just continue to grow.
How far are some of the schools coming from?
We have one high school group coming from just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. A couple of high school groups in Indiana. As far as college groups this year go, a few from Ohio, a few from Wisconsin. Well, where else? A lot of local schools. Last year we had, or a couple years ago, we had Temple University from Pennsylvania come out. So it is largely still a regional festival, but every once in a while we'll get a group. We had a University of Long Beach, California fly out one year. So people know who we are and want to get here. It's just, I can understand why you might not want to book a flight in February to Chicago.
It's a little iffy.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Anybody here? I think we're good online. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This was really interesting. And I loved hearing more about the festival, something that is kind of right here in our backyard and I didn't know a lot about.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming here and letting me share the story.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.